What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we have Lachlan Giles. It is Giles, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, Lachlan Giles. He is I always get the last name mixed up. He was recently the third place medalist at the ADCC championships. A really cool podcast because, again, one of the cool things about that ADCC championships was the fact that he's a small dude. He's not a huge dude, 77 kilograms. And he went in and he beat some big fellas, like some guys that are really big and really strong, very skilled. And he did it and looked great. So we had him back. We had him on the podcast about a year ago and wanted to have him back and talk about everything. So the cool podcast, you'll hear him talk about being the smaller guy against those bigger dudes. But I really enjoyed talking to him with Eugene about sort of creating your own positions, creating your techniques, learning from instructionals and all that kind of stuff. Because again, he was in Australia, so he didn't always have, like we talked about this in the last podcast, he didn't have, maybe the same availability to go and train with these really high level guys that are in California and so forth, so on. So he had to do a lot of work himself, and he kind of talks about how he creates his positions and how he works on them. So I think it'll be useful to you guys to listen to. As always, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We have a lot of extra content that we put on there. We also answer questions if you guys post questions there. And then if you guys want to support the podcast, you can also dip into the realm of CBD with Charlotte's Web. Go to charlottesweb.com and use the promo code Chewjitsu at checkout. Again, I've keep pushing everybody towards the gummies just because I like them. I've recently been eating the raspberry ones again. Yeah. Because Jess really likes the raspberry. They got a little bit of melatonin, so
the sleep gummies.
Yeah, the sleep gummies. They make you go to sleep. But those, and I like the turmeric, and they've also got some new tincture flavors. I want to try those out.
We'll do it.
Because I have the chocolate mint. The chocolate mint's okay, but I'd like to try the other ones. But anyway, you can check that stuff out if you want to, guys. Again, just if you want to. It's something to add into the mix for recovery and for all those sorts of things. And with that said, guys, let's jump into the podcast. Where are you at right now?
At home.
Are you back home?
So. Yeah.
For how long?
Yeah, off to the States again, just after Christmas, actually. So
cool.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to the States now since ADCC?
Haven't been back since. This is the first trip back since then, actually. So yeah, I went to Europe straight out shortly after. I'm trying to avoid going too often right now. It's winter.
Oh yeah.
Where are you guys based?
Kentucky, Louisville.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Does
like
that get cold or not?
It doesn't get crazy cold, but I mean it'll get to like typically it averages like in the wintertime around in the 30s Fahrenheit. So what is that, like 0 Celsius or something? And then it'll drop down to like in our colder months get down to like 0 and like in the single digits Fahrenheit. So it gets pretty cold, but nothing like, it doesn't stay there for terribly long. It doesn't snow. Like we'll get usually like maybe one snow a year, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Slightly colder than here.
Not like where you're at, which is like, what's the coldest Australia gets to?
There's Melbourne, actually, it's usually during the day, like our maximum in winter would be like, on average, it'd be about 13, 14 degrees Celsius. But over and at night, it can get to pretty much 0 it doesn't ever snow really, but well, unless you go up to the mountains. But yeah,
It's cold. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, man, it's been when did we talk to you? It's been over a year, I think, since we had you on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
What's happened?
Yeah, a whole lot. So I don't know. Last time, I mean, you're still kind of under the radar, you think, and I mean, kind of ADCC was just your kind of coming out party, I guess.
Yeah, it was. It was a pretty. I don't know. It was a pretty life-changing thing to happen. So I was very happy with that. Yeah. It was. I don't know. Yeah, it's good to have that reward. Been competing and chipping away and hoping to get a result, like a good result like that for a very long time. So to have that was great.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing, like I remember watching it. Because I remember you lost your first match against Lepre, right?
Yeah.
And then in the open, you go in there and the open weight, and you're up against like Kanan. And I'm like, it's a big, strong dude. I'm like, man, it's going to be a tough match. And, you know, it's funny because I remember I was like in the middle of doing something and then I'm looking over watching it. And all of a sudden I see him like wince and he's tapping. And I'm like, oh shit, he won. Like, that's crazy. And then every match that you had was up against these huge dudes. You went against Kanan, Gaudio, then you had Gordon, and then you had Muhammad at the end. I mean, like, you beat some big dudes. What is it like being like? Because you're an in shape guy. You're not like tiny, but you're not a huge guy like say Muhammad. Muhammad's a huge man. Like I remember having him in the gym, and he's just this giant human. What is it like being your size and rolling against those guys? And what kind of things do you try to work on to kind of make that your game work against them?
Yeah, it's not something I normally do in training, actually. Like usually I usually try to roll with people, you know, within 10 kilos of me, because I think it's kind of like for most of my rolls, just because it starts to get less realistic for what you're going to face in your weight division. Sure. And also injuries and so on as well. So, yeah, it wasn't something I wasn't like. Going into ADCC, I'm going to enter the open weight, do well. So it was, I don't know. I was probably a little bit worried about getting injured, to be honest, going into the open weight. I don't know. I'd never done a international open weight division apart from Kinetic, which was like a month before ADCC. Okay. I'd done open weight divisions in Australia, but never. Internationally, I just thought people were a bit more explosive. These best guys could, you know, like you think of like a Bushesha who can jump around. So I mean, just my mindset. I suppose I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to pull guard because I'm unlikely to take them down, and just try to get a leg entanglement. I think once you get a leg entanglement, it's doesn't matter so much about strength. You can kind of it's hard for them to put their pressure on you from there. So that was my plan. And that worked. So yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. Did you have like, so the first match in 77 kilo, you had, you know, it didn't go your way. Like, did you have any doubts about going to open weight, or did you feel like maybe there's no pressure? Just, you know, you're the smaller guy. You kind of lost in the first round, so there's just not a lot to be expected. Just go out and do your thing.
I definitely didn't feel pressure to perform. Like, I don't think anyone expected me to do well in the open weight. But I wasn't sure about it. Even when I lost that match, and I was annoyed because I felt like I was rolling really, like I thought I prepared very well for ADCC and I was rolling well. So when I lost that match, I was quite disappointed I didn't get to show how I'd been training. So that was one of the reasons why I jumped in the open weight.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know if you've had this experience like before, like because obviously you had a good turnout in the open, but there's been some times where I've competed where it's been like I trained really, really hard leading up to it, did all the things that I would have thought I would have needed to do to be prepared, go in there, I'm not injured, anything else, and then I go out there and I perform poorly. And then there's other times where like I'm just like, you know, I do a tournament like last week, no, whatever, we're just gonna do it. Don't really prepare that properly. Then you go in there and you're just like you're on fire, and it's hard to like put it on. Have you had that experience before?
Yeah, it might have been like that even at I mean, obviously I felt like I prepared well, but I think like the lack of expectations in an open weight division might have affected. I tend to sometimes I'll compete and I'll put more pressure on myself and I actually don't do so well. So I'd say that's certainly something that's happened. Definitely going into that match, especially against when I saw that I had Kanan first round. I'm like, great.
Now, do you think that he like maybe took you like, I mean, and you always take everybody seriously in a grappling match at that level because everybody's good. Doesn't matter who it is, they're all good. But like he looked very, because he's not bad with leg locks. He's good at leg locks, and he was sitting there. He looked very relaxed with you. Just was kind of standing there, and then all of a sudden it was like a turn of a dime. Like that was when it happened. And do you think that he maybe was a little too relaxed, or maybe didn't respect the game that you had there when you got in there? I mean, again, it's hard to say, but what do you think?
Yeah, possibly. I think like if I think I'm trying to think if we were to fight again, he would probably be very very active at disengaging from the leg entanglements, whereas he was trying to kind of a little bit counter me within them, and
Yes.
he was doing reasonably well up until I caught him as well.
Right.
You know, like off my first attempt, he almost took my back, and that was almost the end of the match after that. Well, I assume if he got my back, that would have been over.
Yeah.
Off one of my K-guard entries, which he had like a nice counter to that. But that maybe that gave him some confidence to kind of play within the leg entanglement game a little bit. He wasn't. I was still forcing the leg entanglement entries, but he didn't. He was quite happy to kind of move around within them a fair bit. So yeah, I think he would almost certainly, if we were to rematch, he would change that. It probably wouldn't be very good for me in a rematch.
Well, do you think because your strategy was kind of the same, once you did the open weight, it was kind of the same all the way throughout. Most of your finishes were kind of, 50-50 to that, leg entanglement to the heel hook. Did you feel any need to ever modify your game plan? I mean, first round it worked. Second round against Gaudio, did you suspect they were going to be more aware? Maybe watching you compete. Did you find any reason maybe that you may need to adjust?
I think I had more layers of I feel like I had I still have a full system to get to there. I've got a bunch of options, and I kind of know how people will defend it and how I can try to fight through those defenses. I kind of thought, okay, they might try to counter it in certain ways, but I still have ways I can try to deal with their counters and have the same strategy. So yeah, I was still gonna try that. I could also have tried to do some more reverse De La Riva. I had to do some entries from there, but I feel like against someone bigger, it starts to get easier to get squashed from reverse De La Riva. So I probably was more intent on playing De La Riva. If you watch my match with Lepre, I was playing more reverse De La Riva, which maybe I should have played De La Riva in hindsight.
Live and learn, right?
Yeah.
Now, why do you prefer? Because I know there's again, and this is the thing about jiu-jitsu where you've been around long enough where you see the sort of creation or the growth of these different systems, these different styles from practitioners like yourself, where they come up and then they might change people's jiu-jitsu, and then someone else takes a little bit of that and then they change it. And we in the last podcast we talked about you diving into the leg locks and kind of developing your own sort of style with them. Why do you like the 50-50 style better than say some of the other options that leg locks have to offer?
Yeah, I feel like I'd compare it to the saddle and to outside ashi.
Mm-hmm.
With outside ashi, I just found it was getting quite difficult to expose the heel, and against tall people.
Yeah,
someone like rolling with someone like Craig, who would just come on top and then start to I'd end up essentially in a leg drag or a back take. And when that happens consistently enough, where it's just every session you go there thinking it's a good position and then you end up getting your back taken, that starts to start going, okay, well, I've tried to work any avenue that counters what he's doing, and it doesn't seem to be, I didn't have anything left to go, okay, my kind of final verdict on that was that if they're good with the counters, then that will beat your offense. And I felt with the saddle, there's less it's much less likely. If you get the saddle, it's still a good position to get to, but I find that people can hide their heel and roll out. And even if you get the double trouble and so on, people will wait it out until you eventually, they keep hiding their heel, and eventually you have to let go of that free leg to attack the trapped leg, and they'll turn out and eventually slip out. Not that you can't escape 50-50, but I just find people, usually to escape 50-50, you have to run a little bit of a risk in that you want to turn the direction that exposes the heel. So by turning the same way you turn in the saddle, it often will keep the leg entanglement, whereas if you want to escape your knee, you'll tend to turn the other way, but you have to expose your heel. And so they then have this dilemma: do they stay in the leg entanglement and defend, but stay in it, or do they try and get out of the leg entanglement but risk getting caught? So it gives you more time to work. And and then from that, I kind of have a bunch of things that I do to like a full system within that to try to kind of expose the heel or improve my positioning within there. So
yeah. And and was this something, because I always, just for people listening, like, was this something that you consciously said, I'm going to get better at this position, or was it something like, the way you described it, maybe it was this way where, you were trying this wasn't working, so then you go do this, you get a little success, and then you just kind of go down the rabbit hole and figure out what happens from it? I mean, like, was it a little bit of both, or was it one or the other?
Well, I mean, I started my leg lock game really with Ryan Hall's 50-50 stuff.
Oh yeah,
that was like my
back in the day.
Introduction to heel hooks, and then that would have been over 10 years ago. And then I went into the other positions, and then I think I was starting to find I was getting some heel hooks in 50-50, and then watching some. I was probably watching the North American trials for ADCC around, which was about a year before ADCC. I was already doing some 50-50, and then when I watched that, I saw more heel hooks from 50-50 than from the saddle. And I think people were kind of just the most recent. So
it was the trials. The trials.
Oh, this year in the trials. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2028. I was already playing 50-50 a bit, but that was like when I saw that, I was like, I don't even know if a lot of the time people were kind of deliberately going to 50-50. Like, I don't think they were like, oh, I'm going to get to 50-50 and heel hook. They were just like looking for leg entanglements and then like ending up in 50-50 and getting the finish. But when I sort of saw that, I was like, okay, like there's definitely, this seems to, North America was or is kind of leading the leg lock, especially that East Coast. Is it East Coast? Yeah. East Coast. Tends to have a lot of the really good leg lockers in the world. So if that seems to be happening there, then I just thought I'd run with it and kind of put a lot more time into 50-50, more than what I was doing. And then I just kind of, once I did that, I was getting more success and kind of stuck with that as my main game.
So you just kind of like, how did you drill? Did you just decide this is the only thing I'm going to work on? Especially in preparation for ADCC, did you kind of tailor your training to be that specific way and then kind of branch out from there? Was it all about the 50-50 for you?
Yeah. So it was obviously the more I played with it, the more success I was getting, and then it was just like, it just came to like troubleshooting. Okay, I'm having problems when they escape this way, so I get my training partners to okay, we're going to start from here. You're going to try and escape, and I'm going to try to stop it, and I'd start to work out how to deal with each different direction they could go or each type of defense they would put in, and then entries as well. So once I saw 50-50 was what I wanted to do, then I really focused on which I'd been working a bit anyway, but the that K guard entry. I'd seen the Meows using that to get to 50-50 in a lot of matches. They don't tend to heel hook very much, but it was good to just to see how often they were able to get to that position using that entry. So I started really trying to learn that.
Yeah. I don't know about you, like whenever I'm trying to like get a new position into the game, like if I see something and I want to like get that into the game. One of the things I see with like lower belts a lot of times is that they really like, they'll watch, like if they're watching a position, they might go and say, man, I want to get good at butterfly guard, and they'll start watching butterfly guard sweeps. Or if they want to get good at, say, like daily Hiva, they'll watch daily Hiva guard sweeps or submissions or whatever. For me, I always kind of go back and like entries. And then, like if I'm trying to like add something in, I always like start with like I need to get there first, and then I want to see if I can hold. And if I can hold and get there, then that's when I'll start like adding in the other stuff. Yeah. What do you do when you're adding in something new to your game?
I think that's probably a smart way to do it. Just having, I suppose it's a lot of people like to start at the end to see if they find the end move effective, but right. which is okay, I think, as well. I'd probably do that if it was, let's say it was a prone armbar from butterfly guard. If we use the butterfly guard example, I might do specific train if I wanted to add the prone armbar, but I didn't even play butterfly, for example.
Yeah.
I might see, like, if I could start from that prone armbar position, like grab someone and start from there and see if I can get the feel for the finish. So it's actually, I feel like you got the two options. You can either like get good at the entries, so you're always ending there and you get a lot of repetitions at practicing the finish, or sometimes it's good to be good at the finish and then you're going to want to get there. Like if I go, like, if I get to here, I'm going to finish them with the prone armbar from butterfly guard, then I'm going to keep trying to get to the butterfly guard so I can get my finish to work. So I think like having confidence in the end result being the finish will make you want to get there. Similar to, I think, I sometimes think like with taking the back, like if you get someone really good at the rear naked choke, they're going to want to get the back.
Yeah.
Whereas if they get the back, if you do a lot of training from the back, but they never get a finish, they're probably not going to want to get there so much in training. But that's, I think it depends whether you're doing it through live rolling or like deliberate specific training. Because if you're doing it in live rolling, I think doing the entries first would be good because you're going to, that's going to get you there more often. Whereas if you've got like specific training, I'd personally probably start right at the end. So you can go like, okay, I'm going to be good at the finish. Now we'll take it a step back. How do I get to that finish? And then how do I get into that position?
Yeah. Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking about it. Like a lot of times, most of the positions that I've really like dove into, and it kind of reminds me of what you were talking about with the 50-50 to some degree. It was like where maybe during a roll, I might have gotten there somehow, like I got to the back or got to some position and had some success. And then you almost it's almost like you get a little whiff. Like there's something over there, then you're like, maybe I should go back there, like, so a lot of times that's for me, like a lot of times it's something like that where I remember my back game, a lot of that came from the fact that like I got to the back a couple times and then I would finish guys when I got there. And then I was like, I got to find more ways to get here, and that went down the road, that kind of thing. So that makes sense. Getting that comfort with the end result. So this way you actually have that drive to get there and actually want to pursue it.
Yeah.
I almost feel like when you were talking about the 50-50, that's like your like landing, like this is like your start is that 50-50, and then you just branch out from everywhere because that's where you want to be, and from there you have all these options, right? So it's kind of like you could sometimes even start from 50-50 and then go your way backwards towards entries, or once you're in 50-50, then you go to, the submissions or the heel hooks, things like that. So that's kind of also because that intermediary, it's almost like an intermediary position, that position gives you so many options, so many directions. Like you can go pretty much any way you want. And so that was kind of interesting when you were explaining that. I've never thought about like getting into that middle, like kind of that. It's almost because people can stall in 50-50 and that can be a stalling position too.
If the heel hook's not there.
Right.
Yeah.
Like an IBJJF, like, the 50-50 position is terrible because you'll get guys in the gis and they're hanging on to each other and then they just kind of teeter-totter, and then, unless someone wants to give something up, they don't really break out of it. I feel like if the heel hook, especially with IBJJF, the heel hook's not there,
right,
they should have like a stand-up rule. Like if you're sitting there for like 30 seconds, a minute or whatever, just like stand them up, let them get back to it. Because when the heel hook's there, it's a much more dynamic in position because there's so much more of a threat with the heel hooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more exciting when the heel hook's there.
Yeah. Lachlan, do you play 50-50 in the gi a lot? And if you do, like where do you like to go? Like what are some of your go-tos from there?
Yeah, I play it. I mean, if I'm in the gi, I still try to get to 50-50, but it's usually just for sweeps or back takes or to get out into a leg drag on top. I mean, there are I feel like there are heaps of options. It is, but the problem is if someone like grabs your lapel and wraps it around your leg and holds that lapel and your leg, it's very hard. It's like around their own leg and your leg, and it's just like, tied you up. And yeah, I mean, for me, I personally would just like to see more active stalling calls in jiu-jitsu.
I agree.
Not this. I don't know why they do this 20 seconds of stalling thing.
Oh my god, it's ridiculous.
Where they look at their watch, and then like the guy like then just like wiggles around a little bit. They're like, oh okay, that was an attempt, and then it resets for 20 seconds. It's like no, he was. You thought he was stalling. You looked at your watch. He should be called for stalling, I think.
Yeah.
Are more active. Like you don't have. There's not a certain time. It's just if you're being passive and not trying to improve your position, then you should get called for a stalling call. I think that would do a lot more for making matches exciting.
I mean, because like with wrestling, for instance, I mean, there's so many rules like in wrestling that are like, there because they're trying to break up the stalling that could potentially happen, right? Because I mean, when you look at like the history of wrestling, say in the Olympics and stuff, you look back at it and you used to have these matches that would just go on forever, and then they started to like give time limits and add on points, and then you couldn't lock your hands in certain ways, and you had to you couldn't just back up and continue to back up. You couldn't run out of bounds, and it's something where in jiu-jitsu, I feel like if they really want it to be like consumable by people that aren't just diehard fans, like you're gonna have to do something, especially in the gi. Like I feel like in no gi, there's still stuff that goes on because like you can watch like an ADCC, which usually is exciting, but some guys will basically do nothing for 10 minutes and then wait for the overtime. But and even in the ADCC, sometimes you'll get the wrestlers that'll basically just kind of move around and like it used to. It's better now, but it used to be terrible back in like the old ADCCs where you'd have like some of those big wrestlers that would get the takedown at the last second and get their points, whatever. But yeah, especially in the gi though, you see these like the gi gets tangled up and wrapped around, and then you get this like where both people are just locked up and they're just sitting there and nothing's happening. And I mean, I remember one match with like it was Buchecha, maybe Urbith or something. Like Buchecha's sitting there with his hand on his face, just kind of like I want to do something, but I can't because I'm going to give you a position and we're tangled up and this sucks,
Yeah, that's it's definitely a problem. I mean, it's hard to say if jiu-jitsu ever will be. I mean, I even think of judo, and judo is like it's about throws, and it is more exciting than jiu-jitsu. But I still don't think the average person gets excited about a judo match. Like they would for some sports in the Olympics, for example. Like I just don't know if grappling has that. I do think submissions people can get excited about it. They see someone getting choked or armbarred or something, they probably like, oh, that's pretty cool. But it would have, I think submission grappling might be the one that ends up being the spectator
friendly one.
I don't know how popular it'll actually be, but I can't see gi, no matter how many rule changes we made, I can't see gi jiu-jitsu being a spectator friendly sport. But I think the market is even within the jiu-jitsu community, like to make it exciting for them, because a lot of people are watching in the jiu-jitsu community are watching gi matches and saying this is boring, compared to the what's going on. I think it's just the rules though. I think it's if the rules were changed, it would be more exciting.
Well, yeah, like when you go to all combat sports, judo, wrestling, boxing, they all have that one thing that finality to it. Where in boxing you have the knockout, judo you have the big slam, the ippon, in wrestling you have the throws and then you have the pins. In jiu-jitsu you have the submissions. And I think it's you look at judo rules. You used to be able to grip in certain ways, and then they started having people like come from sambo backgrounds and wrestling backgrounds gripping in weird ways, so they banned a bunch of grips. And then they like got rid of leg attacks, and no grabbing the legs anymore. So now you got to stand and grip, and you're going to get thrown. Like the race, like we want to see someone get thrown. I mean, so it's one of those weird things. It's like where you don't want to like, because I think about this, like I don't want jiu-jitsu to be so nerfed where you have so many restrictions, but at the same time you've got to find that middle ground where you're saying, listen, like we've got to do something, otherwise, like these gi matches end up turning into like just terrible things where nobody wants to watch. I mean, even me, like I love jiu-jitsu, and there's times where I'll watch a match and I'm excited to watch it, and then all of a sudden the gi's tangled up and both people's legs are scissoring across, and then they just kind of back and forth teeter-totter for 10 minutes, and then one gets up and screams he won by an advantage or whatever. You're like, this match sucked, and these guys are good. They're good dudes that just got tangled up in a really crappy position. And maybe like I feel like maybe almost like in MMA where you have like a stand-up, be like, all right, like you've got so long to work in this weird tangled up position, and afterwards doesn't matter, we're just gonna like break you up. Even like in judo, they they get to move, and as long as they're making ground on the ground, right, they can work. But the minute they sort of slow down and nothing's happening, boom, back up to your feet, and let's get back to what we want to see.
What if they like reset? Like if there's a stalling, they reset them in like a position, You know, like in wrestling, they reset them in like referee position, but there's maybe
Well,
a position.
they have periods, yeah.
Well, maybe they reset like in a position, like if you're stalling, then you get put in a disadvantageous position.
You know, that would be actually. I've thought about this before. I think it would be interesting. What do you think about like if there was a
Like a
jiu-jitsu
penalty
match
or something?
No, if you had a jiu-jitsu match that had periods. So like in wrestling, you have like you'll have like for instance in high school wrestling, you'll have 3 2-minute periods, and then you get to decide if you want to be up, down, whatever. What if you did a jiu-jitsu match where you had like instead of like one 10-minute long match, you had periods?
Why would we do that?
I think it would be a neat idea.
Yeah.
Just got my coffee brought to me.
There you
so
go.
There we go.
That's how it is. ADCC bronze medalist right there. That's what happens, right? People bring your
coffee.
shit.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard one as well because I do one thing I do like from a rolling in jiu-jitsu and training jiu-jitsu perspective. I actually quite like that you can take
Time.
sometimes you can get your position and you can take 5 minutes to submit them. You get their back and you can actually like just
Wear them out
work
slowly.
for it until they make it's up to them to get out and so I do like that about training, but as a spectator you're not going to enjoy that. So yeah, I think for the sports side, if we want more people watching it, we do need to make some.
I like the
changes.
fact that ADCC, you've got like I went to a Fight to Win show, and I think Seth Daniels, the guy that did a lot of the production and kind of the lights, and he made it so much more of an event, and I think that hypes people up too. Like when I went to Chewy did a Fight to Win event, and it was just awesome, man. There's lights and there's music, and people, it kind of pumps you up, and people get more excited. And also, I really like the rule set because number one, they're slamming, which is I think it's kind of an interesting aspect. You can't just hold on to certain things without certain consequences. And then there's no draws. If you're aggressive and attacking, you get rewarded for that. So like, as far as, ADCC, that environment, how was that? Do you feel like that helped kind of build the excitement of the event?
Definitely, it was, that was the most like crazy that I've seen a crowd before, or, just the production was amazing as well. So it was very different to anything I experienced. Probably before that was probably the previous ADCC in Finland had like it was like a lesser version of this. This was like
You're in California,
on top of that, but
tons of just jiu-jitsu everywhere.
Yeah, it was so it was really well done. Yeah, it was an incredible event. Definitely, it'd be cool. I don't know why IBGF for Worlds don't do something a bit more similar. I don't see why they can't do a Black Belt Worlds as an event, like
that's a great
a
point.
single event that's separate to the World Championship, where everyone goes to, and I think people would be a lot more hyped for that too.
Well, it allows you to, especially if you go through like with the ADCC, who's competing months in advance, and they're getting ready, and so you start to see these lineups, and you're like, dude, this is going to be a good one, And then, if you had like this thing where people, just like in like other sports where they, they have all these different other qualifying tournaments and things like that, and then they get their chance to go to the Worlds, and then whoever registers for the Worlds like in advance, they have a list of all the rosters and stuff like that, like you said, and start to warm people up and get them hyped up for it, rather than let's see who signs up and that's the Worlds.
And have a 16-man bracket in each division or something like that. That would be that would be good.
They might be moving towards that because this year, in the last couple of years, they've instituted where you had to have a certain number of points,
right?
Because before it could just be like any guy could go to the World Championships and try to compete, right? Now you have to have a certain number of points to qualify for it. So maybe it'll move in that direction at some point.
Well, I thought that maybe like you said, you make it an event. And so you have maybe the lower belts go initially for the first couple of days, because there's a lot of tension there. Like people aren't really as concerned about watching the black belts if they have to compete on their own. So you get all those matches out of the way, and then everybody's kind of relaxed, and then the main event starts. Those are kind of like the build-up fights, and you have the main event, and you make that a whole thing, and you have a lot more spectators, and people are gonna be a lot more focused on the matches, which is the way it should be. With these guys, you have a lot of
exactly
so.
Yeah, I feel like it's annoying even just the you don't get excited about there might be some breakthrough competitor that suddenly he's in the final, and because if you've been watching the Worlds, you might have been watching or at least, in his qualifying rounds, like you don't even get to see them because there's 10 mats going on. So then you're like, oh, who's this guy? Like who's the guy that's fighting, Meow? Like
Yeah.
we don't know who he is. Whereas if you've seen the matches leading up, you're like, oh, this guy's doing really well. Like I think instead of it being like all part of everyone's competing at once, if it was more like ADCC, a couple of mats going with just black belts where you know where they are and you can kind of monitor the division that you want to watch a bit better. I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because that would have been a situation like you. Because if, like, let's say if you had a casual fan that, had like 10 mats to look at, and he's looking at who's on the mats, he sees like, the guy that lost first round in his division going up against Kane Duarte, who won his division. He might have been like, the guy's going to get smashed, and then go watch it. Instead of like, and it's one thing to see it live and another thing to go back and watch it. So, like, to watch you do it live, it was like, oh my God, it was like crazy, right? But to go back and see, hey, how did this guy make it to the how did he just get it? I had to go back and watch those matches, and you already knew he was going to win, but to actually watch that sort of situation where you're seeing this guy break out in front of you, it's fun to see that live. And so being forced to watch, this matter, that matter, whatever, I think that's a good idea when you're talking about like the upper crust, the best dudes in jiu-jitsu. Like they shouldn't be just kind of piled together like herds of cattle. They should be like, look, this is a show that we should be watching these dudes.
Yeah.
Were you getting so after your first 2 matches in the open weight, like were you starting to hear some rumblings of people kind of getting excited about you? And then third round was your third match was Gordon. So can you tell us about that? Like, what was your mindset going into that match? Because obviously he had a great performance. Won gold in absolute in his division. Like, what was your mindset going in, and maybe even strategy because he is such a good leg locker?
Yeah, I mean, I still thought I was going to do the same. Like, I didn't think I was going to do the same thing in terms of outcome, but like, I think actually for all of my matches, each of my matches in the open, after I beat Kanan, I was like, oh well, I've had my, I had my good win. That's good.
I've had my fun.
But and then say with Gaudio, and then even against Ali, I was like, oh wow, at least I got to get to a match for the bronze medal. So that was nice. Against Gordon, I had the same strategy to get to the legs. Like I know, obviously Craig's trained with him a lot, and he's told me like when he rolls with him that Gordon's very, very good. So I'm like, okay, and I know how I roll against Craig, so I'm like, okay, this is going to be a tough one to win. Yeah. But I just thought, okay, well, my best chance is getting to the legs. Like I do have something that's like I have a different system to what he will be used to dealing with, and that can definitely. I think I did pretty well in that exchange because he wasn't used to, like, he's expecting me to move in the same way that he's used to everyone moving in leg entanglements, which is usually going for the saddle and so on. And the fact that I'm turning different angles and looking for different entry points probably threw him off a bit. And so, I mean, I felt pretty good in that exchange. But obviously he managed to get out of there, and then he managed to force himself to half guard, and that sucked.
Is there anything you could have done
that big and skillful on top of you and expect to get out? So yeah.
Well, I was just kind of curious, is there any modifications or anything you would have done different? Obviously it didn't go your way, but is there anything you would have changed or any kind of maybe breakdowns that you thought that maybe you had?
I mean, the thing I'd change like from that is just looking at, I mean, in that first leg entanglement, I mean, I had one chance to, like, I caught the heel in my left hand. I had to connect my hands. Like, obviously, if I could have trained that left side a little bit more, I'm probably like 80. I did train both sides, but I'm probably like 80% as good on my left as I am on my right. So maybe that could have made a difference. But probably the main thing I'd work is that I was on my. He kind of got up from disengaged from the leg entanglement, and I was on my back, and I went to sit up, and before my feet before I'd established a proper seated position, he came in with the underhook. I think I should have just played more on my back with my feet in front until I had the right distance to either sit up and try and attach to a leg or stay on my back. So it's hard to say. I think that's actually probably just really good timing I think he probably practices that. Like when someone's flat and they go to sit up, he's in, because that's the point of vulnerability where your butt's on the ground, but your feet aren't on the ground, and your back's not on the ground either. So you don't have either of your limbs. You're not very mobile to
Yeah.
pummel.
Very easy moving.
So that's where I saw it all go wrong. Up until then, I was kind of happy. So
Yeah. So,
but I mean, I wouldn't. I should say, I wouldn't expect it in a rematch with Gordon. I wouldn't be expecting to win. He's very, very good opponent. In a leg lock only match, you never know. But
you touched on something there when you were talking about it. I thought it's interesting. So, like, one of my guys who just went out to the Nogi Worlds, I had him when we were getting ready for competing. I was getting him to pass to his right to the person's left. It's something I do a lot. Like, I find a lot of success when I pass to the most people's dummy side. Most people that are right-handed or dummy side. It's something when I watch Craig's matches. He plays on the other side, right? Like most people play one side. He plays the opposite side, which again, if you don't, like a lot of people don't, it's strange. Like people don't even pass that direction a lot of times. They don't attack that direction. So most people are good on both top and bottom to one side predominantly. Yeah. And I think it throws people off. Do you do any specific, like it's something I try to keep in mind, but do you do any specific training to go to that other side, or do you kind of go wherever the role takes you?
Yeah, I think I had this idea in my head that I was going to train up our whole gym, on the opposite side.
Yeah.
And then everyone gets really good at the side that everyone else sucks at.
Yeah.
But that never happened. I think because I end up demonstrating the technique, and I'm like, well, I'm going to show it better on the side that I'm better at. So then and then they do that. I've probably, like, when you say that, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, that's right. I do want to get better at, like, my knee cut on my other side. Like, it's definitely, I have my favorite side, and I tend to, I think you just end up, you have like a little game based around, like, like I know when my right leg's forward usually, and I'm going to pass to I'll often move to my left, but I still will move other sides, but it's different types of passes,
Gotcha.
Like I'll usually go like knee cut to my left, and then I'll go under their legs to my right.
Yep.
Or near side knee through to my right, so it's like on my right leg's leading, but I could go either direction. I rarely will go like back leading with my left leg forward, and going to my right. So, but yeah, I think it's better to have a game that links in two directions, if that makes sense. So, like,
of course,
like you've got one leg forward and it goes both ways, than to have a mirror, but it doesn't like link together as well. But I do think I definitely should start developing more of my passing on the other side too.
Yeah, that's where I've noticed the biggest change was the passing. Like, because on the ground I'll still do it both sides, but on the passing, because you'll run into some dudes who, man, like I had this experience once where he had this dude come in when I was a young black belt, and this he was like a blue belt, came in from California to train one day, and while he was in town, passing to his left side, I mean, it felt like it was a good brown belt level. He was tough. Yep. And then, so I was like, well, let me switch it up and go to the right. And then it was like white belt. It was like so strange. It was like, and I was like, you thought about it. So then one of my guys was rolling with him, and I told him, I was like, hey, listen, I was like, pass to his right. I just want to see what happens. So he starts rolling. He immediately goes to the left because that's his dominant side. And then I just tell him, pass the right. Doop, passed. And it was one of those things where it stuck with me, where I was like, man, I've got to get better at both sides, because I couldn't pass this damn blue belt's guard on that one side, but the other side had been so underdeveloped. It was just, and like you said, it has to link together because it has to be a chain of attacks, just like your guard would be, where you go from armbar, triangle to the whole thing. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, and when you're learning, I mean, I think, so when you're developing, like, say, your specific 50-50 game, I mean, do you develop it, like, try to get it as perfect as you can to one side and then go try to work it the other way? Or do you kind of work both sides interchangeably and just kind of bring them both along?
For 50-50, I think it's good to work both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's actually funny because Liv had I can't remember what she like my wife Liv, because she was obviously preparing for ADCC as well. She had some sort of injury or something. I can't remember what it was, maybe a knee injury, but so she was having to work 50-50 on her left side. So I was doing a lot of training with her on that left side, and that's probably I would mostly, when we started specific training, again, the thing is I'm usually trying to troubleshoot or problem solve an issue I'm having, and so that's where, like, when I do the specific training, I'm like, okay, like I'm having an issue when they turn this way and I can't catch the heel hook or whatever. So like I'm usually doing it on my best side because I want to get the best solution to that problem. I want to understand what I need to do to fix that problem. So that's often why I'll end up developing one side better than the other, just because like I'm not going to troubleshoot very well if I do it on my less good side, because I might be missing one of the more basic things that I need to do to solve that problem. But with Liv's injury, we would do a lot of training on the left side, and then I started to feel pretty confident kind of left and right with the 50-50. So as I said, my right side's definitely my more dominant side, but I still feel like the whole game was there on the left side, and yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
but that's one good thing about 50-50. Like Liv's she was about 58 kilos for ADCC, but you can train with someone considerably lighter than you and still have a very productive training session. In fact, like, because Liv's got small legs and small heels, it's actually harder to dig a heel hook sometimes, and actually I think it teaches you more about the mechanics, because you have to really like do everything right to expose the heel and still catch it. So yeah, that's one good thing about that position.
Less strength involved, obviously, and it doesn't require as much. You don't have to really move them. It's especially a bigger body like, a Muhammad Ali or somebody like that. You don't have to really try to move them around as much. You kind of get in your position and then,
that's right.
Do your transitions to expose their legs.
And I suppose you've probably both got, you've both got this problem where your arms aren't going to be stronger than their legs. So actually, I don't know, but even Muhammad Ali, like, I can probably have stronger legs than his arms. It's going to be. I'm not sure actually, but
it'll be a close one.
Was he like who
generally
was...
like he's running into the same problem I am with him in 50-50, where like, okay, he's locked his legs around. Can my arms move it? Not unless I do it in an odd angle, which is off that kind of flexion extension plane, and it's probably going to be the same for him. So that does reduce the impact of being more strong.
Yeah. Was there anybody that you went against that was surprisingly strong, like that maybe was just stood out at ADCC or even in general? Anybody you've rolled with?
Anyone I've rolled with that's strong? Craig.
It's from his leopard underwear. It's probably where he gets all his man strength.
Craig's always annoying to roll with because he's so good, like technically, but also when he wants to, he can just like, sometimes he'll just like grab your arm and put it behind your back, and you're like, no, like you're not meant to be able to do that. He'll just grab your hand and he'll just push it behind your back, and you're like, he's quite strong. I think like I always find like someone with good grip strength is usually that's usually the thing you notice. Like when someone grips and you're like, oh, like I can normally break this grip and now I can't. That's like the most
so annoying,
frustrating thing.
Yeah. I like the grip strength thing. I remember starting to work more on my grips, my strength of the grips, because I remember when I was a purple belt, I went into a tournament, and I remember a guy got a hold of my collar, and I tried to bust the grip off. And I remember it was like, it didn't budge. It was like, it didn't. And I was like, well, what do I do now? Like, I physically can't get this guy's friggin' like bear paw off my collar. Oh, and you're right. Like most of the time when you lock up with someone, the first thing that you typically feel is not like, their strength of their legs or anything like that, but you feel their hands grab a hold of you. And that's like the first point of contact with you. And you're like, a lot of times you'll judge based off that, like how strong that guy feels just out of that first initial grip where you're like, ooh, this guy's strong, or like, I feel like I'm good here.
Yeah, it's funny with my guard passing in the gi, I often don't teach people to break like collar grips, because I just go like, assume that you can't, Because I've had that before, like where I'll have someone like with a good strong collar grip, and I'll like, especially in competition where they'll hold like 10 times harder than they normally would, and you just cannot strip it. Whereas I try to get people to move around the grips more.
Gotcha.
As much as it, I don't know, I feel like it is an important, you get those very good counter fighters as well who will like strip every grip, and they're very good as well. But I tend to play a more like, okay, they got my collar grip, I'm going to work on my controls and work from there. But
see, this is an interesting thing, I think, just from talking to you, because like, again, like, cause like me, I'm that guy. Like because like, as far as when I'm passing, I've been choked out so many times with cross collars, so that like, if it's a straight collar grip, I won't worry about it too much. But if it's a cross collar, I'll like go onto that thing and, do something about it because I don't want to get choked.
Yeah.
But this is the cool thing, I think, because a lot of times people, I guess people just do this in general, right? They want to like sort of take a line in the sand and say, this is the right way to do things. Because even talking in this podcast, right? Like everybody, like a lot of people are doing, like you were talking about Gordon Ryan, like you were coming at him in a different angle, probably because, his coach, he influenced so many people's leg lock games, right? So everybody's doing it their way. And so if he's rolling with someone like, oh, I do this already. Yeah. You're coming at it a different way. It's not a wrong or it's not right. It's just different.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think this is the thing about jiu-jitsu that, especially the young people coming up, because you've been around for long enough, that stuff comes in waves. Like, you have to sort of keep an open mind, because even if it's a different way, it doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's right, because everybody has their own way of doing this stuff. And as you progress, you sort of come up with your own sort of stew for jiu-jitsu that's been based upon all your influence combined with your anatomy and everything else that you have playing for you.
Yeah.
And even, like injury-wise, I remember, telling us you had a really bad knee injury. And it's kind of funny that now that everybody probably says that to you, you're the physio that did this, did his like dissertation in like knee injuries, and now you're like taking people's knees home. It's pretty wild.
He's creating future customers.
You are. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
for that.
right.
Yeah, that's pretty wild though. Like, I mean, because I asked you before on the previous podcast, like how much maybe that knowledge of knees and biomechanics and kind of anatomy is maybe, it's beneficial, really knowing and studying the body and knowing kind of jiu-jitsu and kind of what works and how it works.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I've been thinking about it. Like, it's actually very hard for me to quantify like how much that influence. Because when I'm doing a submission, I kind of like in my mind I am. Like, I'm like, okay, that's the ligament or whatever I'm attacking, but I'm like, I don't know what it would be like. I can't remember before I knew the actual anatomy, what I was thinking I was doing, But it's funny, like with like heel hook finishing mechanics, like a lot of the time I'm like, okay, if you have like a rotated heel and an externally rotated knee joint, and then you apply bridging pressure on the side of the knee, that will tear the MCL. So that's what I'm thinking about doing in my head. And speaking to some people, and they're getting into like, oh, you've got to have this pressure there and all this. Some people get very like particular about what angle and what like where your top leg needs to be and how it needs to be like this and that. I'm like, I think I actually, with my anatomy understanding, just make it a lot simpler. It's like, no, if I can rotate the knee joint and have bridging pressure on the side of the knee, that will do it. And I think so I think that probably influenced my leg lock game a little bit. I say it's simple, like it's obviously there's a lot of complexity within like how you're gonna go about setting that up, but I think understanding the anatomy there has helped me quite a lot with my finishing mechanics. Because I think some of the stuff that I do, like you'll see a lot of, which I don't see many other people do, but you'll see me like stepping on the hips. Like there's a few photos where I'll have like the heel hook, the knees rotated, and I'm stepping on the hips and bridging into the knee. And maybe that's just a result of me going, okay, well that's the direction that's going to put pressure on the medial ligament. But yeah, not sure.
Like the braking mechanics and like the force angles, which way they have to be. And, obviously for an MCL, you have to, inversion and then kind of you're causing some rotation and
Yeah.
and then you're kind of gapping the joint as well. So you're doing all these multiple things, which is like stressing the ligament at like multiple ways at once, which is going to make it fail, more likely to fail.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's right.
there you go.
Physio geek out time.
This is awesome. No, this is fun. Like it's so much
awesome.
fun, and it's just like, and you know why? People think about why on inside heel hook, and I maybe ask your opinion, but for me, when you're looking at you're attacking the foot, why is the heel or why is the knee where the break occurs or where the injury occurs? It's because of the ligamentous structure in the ankle at that direction is so strong. And I mean, that's kind of basically it. It's like the force travels through the ankle and, it goes to the weakest link. And that in turn is your knee.
Occasionally you will get someone who will injure their ankle instead of their knee from a heel hook. But yeah, it's generally, especially for the inside heel hook, generally that medial ankle ligament is stronger than the medial collateral of the knee.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard. There's not a lot of injuries like that. There's not a lot of medial ankle injuries. I mean, obviously, like 95% are outer or inversion, so on the outside of the ankle.
Yeah.
So, that's why usually if you're doing the other direction, it's going to be if you have a toe hold, it's going to usually injure that ankle before it gets to the knee.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Look at that.
That's cool.
I'm making this shit up. No, okay.
No, I was just listening because I was
fun,
like,
man.
I've had my ankle popped a couple times on outside heel hooks,
yeah.
but again, inside heel hooks, I don't really play around with them too much. If they get a good catch on that heel, I'm pretty quick to tap because I like my ACL.
Yeah,
Let's
and
keep
your
it around.
ACL and your meniscus and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, whatever's
that's
left of that thing.
Everything, yeah.
So, man, how's things been different since you won? Maybe it hasn't changed much, but I imagine it probably has because it seems like you've been doing a lot of traveling, and I've enjoyed your social media since you won. It's been funny because for me, like, so I'm just one of these guys where I'm like, look, man, like I enjoy someone that has a lightheartedness about things,
Yeah,
so you went out there and won, and it's been fun. Like, I think one of my favorite ones was if you guys haven't seen this, if you go to Lachlan's Instagram, there was a Because Jiu-Jitsu post, and it reads, in the year 2019, ADCC was held on American soil. More non-Brazilians medaled in it than any other ADCC in history, but by far one of them stood out among the rest. And then you see, if you look below it, you see Gordon Ryan, Lachlan, and then Buchecha. And then it says, his story and legacy will be passed down from one generation to the next. This is the picture of him with his well-deserved bronze medal. And then there was like a bunch of shit going on in the comments and stuff. I'm like, oh, it's so ridiculous, but it was funny.
Yeah, it's I've had to up my Instagram game.
Well, like I think
it's been great. I mean, it's obviously it was like really good timing with the leg locks instructional that was due for release.
Yeah. Was that already like, so just curious, like, was that already due to release, or did you film it after the ADCC?
No, I filmed it before. I was editing it. Yeah, and I was like, I was thinking like, I hope I do some of this at ADCC. You know what, as well, like what I find filming those instructionals, I always learn. It makes me really break down my game, and I end up getting better at my game because I start understanding even more what I'm doing. Because sometimes there's things that I'm doing that I still haven't become consciously aware of.
Yeah.
And then when I have to watch I analyze rolling footage of myself and I'm teaching it, and I'm going back and reshooting things and going through that process. Like I feel like I get much more knowledgeable about the position I was working. And I finished filming that. I finished filming the majority of that just before that kinetic tournament, which is about a month before ADCC. And then I was just like adding extra little bits right up until just before ADCC.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that's some
and then
good
I was
timing.
editing. Basically, I started editing it pretty much like on the way to ADCC. I was starting to like go through the editing, and then after I had that performance, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get down and
get that shit out
as quick as possible. But yeah, I always find actually one of my favorite things about making the instructionals is actually how it impacts my game, which is that's really good.
Yeah, well, I think that's like the benefit of teaching, right? Like you start to have to like break things down, not just to do them, but to give them to someone else in a simple enough manner that they can learn. Which means you've got to like, I call it like mama birding. You got to break it down into chunks that these people that don't know it, they can learn it. And then if you, I don't know about you, like one of the things I do whenever I do an instructional is I put together a mind map first to sort of like figure out how it all links together, because sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I just do it and then I have to figure out and go back and like engineer like what is it exactly that I'm doing, and then it's in that process that sometimes I get like I look at it and I'm like, oh man, this is way more involved than I originally thought it was.
Yep. Yeah, it's I mean, I'm doing one at working on another instructional at the moment, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that you have to work. Like for me, it's working out the context is the hard thing. You know, yeah. Let's say like you know the crossover. You know, like someone goes to pass your guard, and you do like the crossover. You bring your outside leg over the top, and sometimes it'll go to the near arm. Sometimes it'll go to the far arm or far shoulder, and I'm like, when you go, okay, when does it do? And like, you know, you're like, I don't actually know, like what's the right, like there's things that you're doing, but you don't, to be able to explain it for someone, to be able to learn it. I guess what you're trying to do with an instructional is take the things that you've learned or the things that you do and present it in a way that people don't have to go through that trial and error process. They're like, oh, okay, this is how I do it. I don't have to spend like, you know, hours or years playing that position to just intuitively understand how to do it. I can just understand it now and start doing it the right way immediately. Yeah.
You basically you're taking all the stuff and you're just like peeling away all the layers and just getting to the good. It's like you have to peel a fruit, you know. You're not peeling, you're just eating the fruit. You're not having to peel the skin and all that stuff. You're getting them all like the stuff right away. Which it's a way, you know, really you're learning from some of the best people that are kind of masters of what they do, and then you're also getting that condensed in a way, like you said, where it doesn't take you a year to learn this thing. You maybe learn it in a couple months. So
yeah. It is always tough. I always struggle to find what's the right amount of information to give as well. Like I probably in my instructionals, they end up being quite long, which is. It's a lot of information. I have had like some feedback, like some people are like, oh, like how do I approach this? There's too much, and I kind of feel like I'm like, yeah, but that's how much you need to know. You know? that's just how it is. Like some people like to make it is real. Like I think concepts are really good. Like they're the concepts to me are the things that like you can go, okay, when you're in this position, like, you know. Don't give them, you know, for example, let's say like, you know, don't let them get the underhook, you know, or something like that. Like, sure. Or always try to win the underhook battle. Like that would be a really good guideline that's going to help you in 99% or 95% of the time. But then what I find then breaks that, like, you know, what's the difference between someone who's good and great? And it's often knowing when to break the rule. You know, I say concept, maybe more like rules, you know. Because then you'll find like, oh, well, you know, you watch Lepre here, he lets you get the underhook, but he'll, you know, do this. So it's like, oh, okay, like you can let them get the underhook, but this is an exception to that rule. And knowing like all those little exceptions is actually often where you'll catch someone who's good, thinks they're doing the right thing, but actually they're falling into your trap. So that's why I feel like jiu-jitsu can be simplified, and it's a great way to progress very fast, very quick. But at a certain point, you then need to understand the exceptions, and that's why I sort of end up with these longer instructionals where I'll try to cover the main points, but also like, okay, here's all the scenarios as well, or at least the most common scenarios where you have to start thinking about this and that and problems people are going to give you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've watched some of your instructional stuff before, and you know, you do go into some details, but I mean, at the same time, it's still entertaining. Like, I'm not bored to tears, and you're not like, yeah, you're not like, well, I mean, you're not like monotone and boring. I mean, it's interesting stuff, and it's valuable. I think for anyone like that gets an instructional, whatever it might be. I think that one of the things that people need to adopt is that you're not going to pass through this thing one time and then that's going to be it.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
like whenever I've gotten an instructional, whether it was whatever it was related to, I would watch over this thing over and over and over again. And even like with like a jiu-jitsu instructional, if it's something that I want to continue to use, I'll watch the video like again and again and again, or I'll watch right before training during a day, at least once a day, so that I can really try to hammer that sucker in. And a lot of times what ends up happening is as you watch this stuff over and over again, you start to like pick up new details that you were missing before. And then if you're going to the gym and implementing it and actually trying it, then you get to like figure out, okay, well, this wasn't working. Let's go watch it again and watch some of the stuff that they're doing. And then, so, I mean, you can't simply just watch through it one time. So that information that maybe someone was like, well, that's too much. Well, if you watch it again and again and again, eventually it gets easy. And to sort of go with your point about sort of breaking rules, one of my favorite quotes was from Charlie Parker, and he was a musician, and he was talking about, you master the instrument, master the music, and then you fuck all that shit, and you just play music, like you just play. So again, it's like as you go through this stuff, you obviously, especially with instructionals or even instructionals with your coaches, where they teach you stuff, you're taking all this in, but eventually you got to be like, well, let me just see what happens if I do this, and again, kind of play with it with your own style.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do, but it's a horrible thing for a new person to do.
Agreed.
Like you see, you see these sometimes a white belt, and they're going like, oh, I'm going to try and work from here. It's like, no, like, you need to get good at this first. Like, just get good at.
Go
like,
play full guard. Well, it's like we live in this thing where it's like, especially today's age, where like. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like back in my day, that kind of stuff. But I feel like people have gotten this thing where they want that shortcut. It's like, even with someone like you, like if someone goes and buys your instructional that's showing these leg locks, like, you think about listening to you kind of got introduced with leg locks about 10 years ago, and then all of a sudden it's been like stewing in there, and all of a sudden now you're, 10 years later, you've got your own thing that's good enough to compete at the world level. Like nothing is a shortcut with this stuff. Now it's good to have that stuff to guide you where you don't make as many mistakes as you did, right? So it might be faster and you'll get better faster, but you're still going to have to put your time in. There's no shortcut to it. And like you said, with a lot of newer white belts, there's so much information coming out, and just like, man, like, look, just start in the beginning and like learn from these guys, whatever. And then like once you're like, some years into it, then you start to kind of come up with your own stuff. But for the while, you learn from the people that have been there, done that.
Where can people get your instructional? What's it called, and where can people get it?
Yeah, so I have a few through BJJ Fanatics. So I've got the high percentage chokes, which is on like front headlock system. I've got the half guard anthology, the guard passing anthology, which is the half guard portion of that. There'll be more on that to come. The body lock pass and the leg lock anthology, they're all through BJJ Fanatics. And I have some content on the grappler's guard as well. So I've got some stuff on butterfly guard and single leg X, and a bit on like sweep prevention. So like how to stay on top and counter a bunch of different sweeping options. So if you use that, if you can use the code Lachlan, that will save you 30% and help me out.
Sweet. Awesome, man.
So check that out, or check out I've got a YouTube channel, Absolute MMA St Kilda, so you can follow that. I regularly put up some of the videos from my classes and so on as well. So.
And then you'll be in the States you're doing seminars. You'll be in the States pretty soon, right?
Yes. So I'm going to be in LA, San Diego, Phoenix, and then mostly Texas. So pretty much going around most of Texas. So Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas, or Fort Worth, and then off to Hawaii as well. So
nice.
It's going to be a very busy trip.
Awesome,
It's
brother.
going to be fun, man.
Well, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Good talking to you again, brother.
It's our pleasure. Thank you again. Congratulations with all your success, and talk soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank
All
you.
right, brother.
Take care.
All right, guys. So that was the podcast with Lachlan Giles, and Eugene is looking at me very awkwardly. It's not going to work though, because I'm a seasoned pro at talking on videos. You're not gonna mess up my game. Again, if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support it, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, get the extra content like some stretching videos and some stuff I put up on there with Eugene. I'm also going to be adding a few extra bits and stuff coming in the future as part of a new sort of content idea or process that I have coming up in January. And then if you guys want to get some CBD, you go to charlottesweb.com, use promo code Jiu-Jitsu and say 15% at checkout instead of 15.
I think that's it.
That's it, Eugene.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Are they going to get this before Christmas?
Yeah.
When is Hanukkah go? Is it Hanukkah going?
It's like around.
It's around the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
intermingles.
Intermingles, yeah. So happy.
There's 8 days, so it's gonna blend in somewhere.
Like, so 8 days of that. Like, what do you do for 8 days? Like, is it like kind of like just each night's a little different, or do you guys like do like something?
Well, I mean, you just give. I don't know. I never did like presents every night, but we're gonna give my kids like stuff every night.
Okay.
They get everything. They get Christmas. They get Hanukkah.
Yeah.
They can have Kwanzaa. They can have whatever they
Best
want.
of both worlds.
They can have everything.
You
know what? Just have fun. Open some gifts. Play with some toys.
See family.
See family. Eat some food.
Eat some food.
Do some jiu-jitsu. Do a little jiu-jitsu in the middle of it. So
be thankful.
be thankful.
Be thankful for what you got, because again, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. Be thankful for your friends and family, and I'm thankful for you, Chewy.
I'm not thankful for you.
Oh, well, that's pretty rough. That's a pretty rough way to go. Well, anyway.
Shit just got real.
You did. So, yeah, with that said.
The podcast's over. This is the last episode. You should finish with me.
No, we'll see you guys next time, and bye.